Another day to do business. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversations right here on Business Morning. I'm Ini John Mekwa, and this is Channels Television. It's Business Morning. Let's start from the global space as usual. Prices, that's of oil, they rose for a fourth straight day on Thursday after a new wave of U.S. strikes on Iranian military installations. That has fueled fears of renewed full-scale conflict and supply disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz. The United States struck Iran's coastal defenses and missile sites on Wednesday after reimposing a naval blockade of its ports, while Iran has threatened to shut off more regional energy exports, saying that it was engaged in an existential war with America. So 0.38% up is what we see for Brent. We see that it's lower than what it was at this time yesterday. This time we had about $85 yesterday, so it's now at $84.60. But of course, the threat is still there, so the sentiment is still negative, which leads to an increase in price. For WTI, $79. We see that has tapered a bit because yesterday it was at $80, so it's $79.52 a barrel, 0.19%. So oil prices have gained this week as attacks deepen supply disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz, and that has handled about a fifth of the world's oil and liquefied natural gas trade before the war began. Hostilities between Iran and the U.S. reignited last week, fraying an already fragile truce that was reached in June after several months of fighting. Goldman Sachs says that Brent could exceed $110 in the fourth quarter if the Gulf exports recovery continues to stall, but could fall to as low as 60 by year end if the tensions ease and production recovers faster than expected. Meanwhile, the United States Energy Information Administration says that crude inventories fell 1.7 million barrels in the week to July 10. That's compared to what analysts had expected of 2.6 million barrels draw. And as it concerns us back here in Nigeria, S&P Global says that the Dangote refinery is helping protect Nigeria from rising global fuel prices by reducing the country's reliance on imported refined petroleum products. The report says that local refining has improved fuel supply, lowered exposure to volatile international shipping costs, and strengthened energy security. According to S&P Global, the refinery's growing output has helped stabilize the domestic fuel market despite disruptions in global supply chains and rising freight costs. The report notes that Nigeria is now better positioned to withstand external price shocks that previously drove up local fuel prices. Analysts say sustained domestic refining could improve foreign exchange savings, reduce import dependence, and strengthen the country's long-term energy resilience, provided crude supplies to local refineries remain consistent. Still from the oil and gas there, the Petroleum Products Retail Outlet Owners Association of Nigeria, that's Petroan, they're asking the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited to restart operations at the Port Harcourt, Warri, and Kaduna refineries to help stabilize fuel prices. The association says reviving the government-owned refineries would boost local fuel supply, encourage competition in the downstream sector, and reduce reliance on a single refinery for petrol supplies. Petroan was also asking for faster recovery rehabilitation and steady crude oil supply, saying that stronger domestic refining would improve energy security and help keep fuel prices stable. Let's see how the market closed yesterday in the local bourse. The all-share index closed negative again, 0.21%, 242,366.75. The market cap has gone up to 156.2 trillion naira, even though it lost a bit of money yesterday. Volume, value, and trade yesterday closed in the negative. Deals was just about 4,916. Top gainers, we see, was similar to what we had the previous day. First Holdco, Thomas Ray, and Legit International. Legit Internet. They were the top gainers, and top losers are Transnational Express, International Breweries, and HM Core. And the top trades, all from the banking sector. First Holdco, Sterling, and Zenith Bank, they led top trades. They led the trades for yesterday. So other stories now. Nigeria's external reserves rise to $51.86 billion. That's the highest level since 2009. And it reflects a stronger foreign exchange inflows, improved oil receipts, as we've seen in the price of oil there, and sustained policy reforms by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The increase strengthens the country's external buffer, enhances its ability to meet import obligations, and supports stability in the foreign exchange market. Analysts say that the higher reserves will also improve investor confidence and provide greater resilience against external economic shocks. Economists note that maintaining the reserve growth will depend on continued oil production, will depend, on continued oil production, steady capital inflows, and prudent monetary and fiscal policies amid global economic uncertainties. And also yesterday we saw FAAC was shared, the Federation Account Allocation Committee. They shared 2.55 trillion naira in the month of June. That's the revenue among the federal government, the states, and the local government councils. A breakdown of how we arrived there, allocation. It has 1.81 trillion naira in statutory revenue and 740.72 billion from value-added tax. Under distribution, we saw the total share there, 2.55, and the federal government got 923.44 billion. States got 38.21 billion, and local government got 591.3 billion, 13% derivatives. We've talked a whole lot about how FAAC has improved, especially since the removal of subsidy. And of course, when we see high oil prices, it fits into this. And we keep asking the question, does this trickle down to the people? Well, FAAC says that gross federation revenue rose. You see what I'm saying? 4.5 trillion naira for June. There was an increase of 4.5 trillion. It was driven by higher collections from companies' income tax, value-added tax, import duties, and petroleum royalties, although receipts from petroleum profit tax and hydrocarbon tax declined. Yeah, one of these days we'll settle on that conversation again, drill down on what impact it has had. So yesterday also we did see from the NBS the headline inflation for the month of June. We saw that ease really slight, 15.91% in June from 15.93, so just 0.2 in May, and that's according to that latest price released, index released by the National Bureau of Statistics. They said that the decline marks the first slowdown in 3 months, in line with projection made by financial derivatives company. Month-on-month inflation also eased, 1.66 from 1.75, and that's despite a slight improvement in food prices. Food prices continue to climb. We had that conversation with FDC on Tuesday. Food inflation we see rose, even though headline inflation declined. Food inflation rose 17.52. Core inflation also, however, eased to 15.92 from 16.82. The latest figure come ahead of Central Bank's Monetary Policy Committee meeting. That's next week. And of course, that is going to influence the direction and sentiment of the MPC. And also, so of course, reactions have been following this. We have one from the Center for Promotion of Private Enterprises, CPPE. They said that Nigeria's inflation challenge remains largely structural, and that's despite this easing that we have noticed. The organization says that the June inflation report shows that supply-side constraints, not excess consumer demand, continues to drive prices. So it's not about consumer demand, which is normally the case, but according to CPPE, it's supply-side constraints, and we link this a lot of times to insecurity. There's threatening supply of food, among other things, and logistics. According to CPP, insecurity, high transport and energy costs. There's also supply chain disruptions, imported inflation remain the biggest drivers of inflation. CPP notes that food, transport, housing, utilities, and energy accounts for about 72% of inflationary pressure, and the group is urging government to focus on reforms that will reduce production costs, strengthen supply chains, and improve productivity rather than rely on further monetary tightening. Well, that's CPP. Let's find out what FDC will say about this. We saw their forecast. I believe the forecast is about 15.88%. That's what FDC thought that the numbers will come out, even though we now see it's 15.91%. So on Tuesday, we had that conversation with the Assistant VP of FDC, Dr. Ifeoma Nwokolo. She joins us again this morning. Dr. Nwokolo, FDC said 15.88. You were too optimistic because NBS is saying it's 15.91.
Yeah, we were quite on track. At least the direction was same. And their own margin was about 0.02%, and our own margin was 0.05%. So we are still within the margin of error, I would say.
Yeah, but this doesn't give us succor when it comes to the price of food, this decline that we see.
Yeah, the decline that we saw was basically, I would say, what is driving inflation, what drove inflation in the month of June. Where one, we have some exogenous factors and some endogenous factors. So the exogenous factors were basically because of the truth effects that we saw that impacted. So if you look at the headline inflation, and you see that the decline that we saw, I would say that the base effect has waned this time, because if you see the prices of last year June and this year June, we had little or no difference. The only significant change in price that we have was the price of Gari, which declined from 35,000 naira June last year to 19,000 naira June this year. The price of rice was even cheaper this year, 60,000 naira compared to June last year. So the price of beans was 75 last year June and it's 80 this year. So base year effect has literally waned. But what we are seeing is that the major issue now is the food inflation. Food inflation is the major issue. And I would say they are the basic drivers of food inflation, even though they are transitory factors, and they are underpinned by structural factors, which include insecurity. Yes, insecurity is a major concern. You look at those states that are the food belt state. If you look at month-on-month food inflation in the food belt state, I'm dwelling on month-on-month because month-on-month inflation gives you a true picture of what inflation is. Why I always say that headline inflation are historical. So month-on-month inflation gives us a true reflection of what inflation numbers are. And if you look at month-on-month food inflation in states that are in food producing states, you find out that we have deflation. They were all in negative. Look at states like Borno had minus 3.54%, Benue minus 2.36%, and you have Bayelsa minus 1.34%. They all had deflation. And what does that mean? It means that all the food produced were trapped in those states. Because of insecurity reasons, they could not transport those food to the urban areas. And we also note that we have that is the supply chain disruption we're talking about. Insecurity reasons, one. Secondly is also the logistic costs. The logistic costs of bringing those commodities from the rural area to the urban area. And we saw food inflation in urban area increase. So this is the trend that we are seeing, and coupled with the fact that we have had in recent time, we have what we refer to as increased anti-insurgents activities around borders. This is because of insecurity. So we are trying to kind of close. There's a little bit closure in the borders, and borders are not usually meant for just terrorism and whatever activities or whatever we may call it, but we should know that the borders are where we also do what? Import commodities. Some smuggle through the borders to Nigeria. So we are seeing that this supply constraint really impacted the food inflation, and we have had 5 consecutive increase in food inflation from February up until now. So the major concern now is the food inflation, and we know that food is the highest in the basket. If you look at our CPI basket, food is the highest. So if food inflation is still high, so the tendency of inflation reversing this trend, even though it's a minimal, I would say we can say it is flat, it's a minimal decline, you may reverse upwards, coupled with the fact that the truce between Iran and US is broken. So these are factors that can also trigger inflation in July. Another important factor we should not underlook is the sales of petroleum products in dollar. So if the government does not do anything within the space of time, I tell you that this could increase inflationary pressure if we begin to sell PMS or diesel in dollar. We get from dollar because Dangote is recently getting those products in dollar. So that contract needs to be renewed so that we can at least be able to curb inflation and Naira remain stable. If you note, from when we have this Naira to crude swap, we know that Naira has been quite stable. So if that is not...
Dr. Nwokolo, how do you see this impacting the decision of the MPC? That's Monday and Tuesday next week.
Yes, well, this trend is a one-off trend, and it's a very minimal decline. I think that and the consensus opinion is that they may hold rates steady, yes, and then wait to see what the trend of inflation is going to be in a couple of months. So this trend that we have just seen is just for the month of June, and it's just a 0.02. Food inflation is still very, very much around. So the CBN is likely to maintain status quo to see what the trend is going to be, maybe in the next meeting, which will be in October or November.
All right.
See what the trend is before they take a decision.
Okay, so it will be a hold. That's what FDC sees.
Yeah, it will be a hold.
At the meeting. Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Nwokolo, for your time and sharing the perspective of FDC this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Nigeria's economic outlook for the second half of the year, that was the focus of conversation. Policymakers, economists, and some business leaders came together, invited by the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. They did the mid-year economic outlook and then, of course, gave some forecasts for what to expect in the second half of 2026.
That this should for us be.
As Nigeria's economic reforms continue to reshape the business landscape, leaders and policymakers gather in Lagos to assess their impact and identify new opportunities for growth.
History teaches us that economy do not transform in a moment of comfort, but in a period of challenges, difficult choices are made.
The Special Advisor to the President on Economic Affairs, Dr. Tope Fashua, defends the administration's reforms, saying the measures are laying the foundation for long-term economic growth.
The macroeconomy is what you guys are fixing. Oh yes, we know that the macro is doing well, but look, you see, if you don't build a good macroeconomy, you cannot have a good macroeconomy. You can't put something on nothing. The something that you have to, the superstructure, okay, is the macroeconomy.
While acknowledging the progress made, economist Dr. Ayo Teriba calls for deeper capital market reforms, asking the federal government to list state-owned enterprises on the NGX.
If we had been there, if we had been like China and we would sit on 30% of the 63 trillion that accrued from January to May, that would offset about 24 billion out of the president's efforts to try and reach 29 billion in debt.
The host, the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce and Industry, says that small businesses still face funding and production challenges, and they are asking for reforms that will deliver real support.
The aim is that they really want to put into consideration those challenges that SME are having over the years, and let it give them some time and see how SME will benefit.
Participants say sustained collaboration between government and the private sector will be key to translating economic reforms into broad-based growth and improved business confidence.
What should we focus on?
Yeah, so we know that pension, we did give you that story from PenCom yesterday, and they've been so proud of what they've been doing, talking about the Pension Commission. They've been celebrating what they call 3 years of transformation in the industry. They have achievements which they say include 758 billion naira pension bond that has directly impacted over 975,000 Nigerians. And they say they've achieved this between 2024 and 2026. The Commission says that 10.7 trillion naira has been created as new retirement wealth, and over 938,000 workers have been protected. There's been 22% increase in aggregate monthly income from 12.2 billion to 14.9 billion. And all of this, they say, has ended nearly 2 decades of pension injustice. So we say congratulations to them, but of course we expect more work from PenCom, because to whom much is given, much is obviously expected. Now, the acting Secretary General of UN, that's the United Nations Trade and Development, UNCTAD, Mr. Pedro Manuel Moreno, is warning that without deliberate action, critical minerals could become the next commodity trap, as mineral-rich countries supply the next industrial era, while others process, manufacture, innovate, and capture the larger gains. UNCTAD notes that strategic sectors accounted for 44% of greenfield project values in 2025, and that's up from 16% in 2020. They are shaping where future productive capacity is built, and they're capturing value from the next generation of trade. Mr. Moreno says that Africa should not be treated as a passive supplier of raw materials for energy transition, artificial intelligence, infrastructure, or advanced manufacturing. Elsewhere, if the world needs Africa's minerals, partnerships must help build African industries. It says that the world clearly needs Africa's minerals. The defining choice is whether that demand preserves the old geography of extraction or it helps create a new geography of production, capabilities, and retained value in Africa. Well, talking about adding value, I guess that's what the federal government has attempted to do in recent times, but very specific now in the pharmaceutical sector of Nigeria, because the government disclosed it has granted more than 6 billion naira in tax waivers to 47 Nigerian pharmaceutical manufacturers under the Presidential Executive Order on Health Products, as part of efforts to accelerate local production of medicines and reduce Nigeria's dependence on imported pharmaceuticals. Let's get inside information on this with the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Fitson Healthcare PLC, Mr. Biola Adebayo. He's also a member of the Executive Committee of the PMG at Man Manufacturers. Good morning, Mr. Adebayo, and thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, Ini.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. Good morning, Nigerians.
So, I think we've had, tax waivers and something like this before. These efforts by the government, normally, would you say it has been impactful?
Thank you very much. Let me commend the current federal government of Nigeria for the initiative, especially the fiscal incentive given to pharmaceutical manufacturing to ensure that prices of earth commodities, especially pharmaceutical products, which of course were on the rise prior to the implementation of the presidential executive order, they were able to put in place this fiscal incentive, which has stemmed the upward trajectory of the prices of earth commodities in Nigeria. I want to assure Nigerians and I want to assure you that that incentive has been very, very helpful, especially in the pharma industry and given the current stability that we have in the prices of commodity of pharmaceuticals in Nigeria today.
Yeah. So, in what way, if we are more specific, would you say it has come in handy in the industry or in the sector?
Yeah, thank you very much. Prior to March 2025, that was before the PEO came into effect. Of course, pharmaceutical raw materials and packaging materials attracted between 5 to 10 or 15% duty, including other statutory taxes and levies. But with the introduction of a PEO in March, we are no longer paying custom duties and other statutory levies, taxes, which of course have made pharmaceutical manufacturing input to be cheaper. We are able to, produce cheaper, more. We utilize our capacity a lot more, and like I said earlier, the upward trajectory of prices of earth commodities began to stabilize. As a matter of fact, that initiative alone stemmed the upward rising of the prices of the commodities. It has stemmed that prices today have become stabilized, and the next phase we are looking forward to is to begin to see those prices coming down for as long as this incentive or this fiscal incentive still remains in place. Therefore, Nigerians will now begin to see a drop in the prices of earth commodities anytime from.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nigeria will begin to see a drop in prices of commodities anytime from now. Like I said, that upward trajectory of prices have been stemmed. Prices have now become stabilized. We are producing more. Capacity utilization
has increased. 70%, which you're asking for, because your arm of man asked that you want 70% local production of pharmaceuticals. And I have to add there, when we say production, do we see the raw materials coming from Nigeria, or are we just putting those things together after importing the raw materials?
Yeah, thank you very much. Again, because of the commitment of the current government to its policies, especially in the manufacturing sector, a lot of us manufacturers began to yield to those policies. In the past, when they put policies in place, we hardly believed, because it doesn't take them time for somebody else to come into the scene and will change the policy. In other words, talking about policy somersault. But in the last 3 years, we have seen that the current government is walking the talk. The PEO has come into effect, is useful, we are benefiting from it. Now, as at 2018, the ratio of the medicines manufactured in Nigeria compared to the imported is about 30 to 70. That is 70% in favor of imported manufacturing, imported finished goods. As at today, given the data from NAFDAC and other relevant agencies, it is 50-50. That shows that in about 3-4 years, we have really improved. It's 50-50 as of today. I can assure you, in another 3 years or 4 years, we are going to upturn that ratio into 70% of medicines being consumed in Nigeria being manufactured by local manufacturers and about 30 being imported. That is our aspiration. That is where we are going. And I can also assure you that until we get to about 90-30, we will not stop.
90-10, you mean?
90-10, sorry. 90-10 will not stop. That's our aspiration.
But what about the raw materials? Are they from Nigeria or they're imported?
Yeah, thank you very much. Everything is in stages. As at 4 or 5 years ago, you will not even hear anybody in Nigeria thinking of starting a manufacturing facility for APIs. That is raw and packaging materials, raw materials in Nigeria. As of today, we have 2 facilities coming up. One is about to be commissioned to manufacture an array of manufacturing APIs in Nigeria today. That wasn't the case about 5 years ago. Like I said, 5 years ago, nobody was even thinking about it. But because of the federal government policies, especially the fiscal incentives being given, either through PEO or through IDEC, which is a certificate being issued by the Federal Ministry of Finance, all of us have believed in this policy, and we could see the sustainability of it. Hence, we begin to source for fund to inject into the pharma industry, especially across the entire value chain, be it drug discovery, drug production, manufacturing of API, even marketing and distribution. All these chains, they can't do without each other. And we begin to invest in every segment of the value chain, and especially as being promoted by PFAAC. Therefore, when you combine what PFAAC is doing, Federal Ministry of Health is doing, Federal Ministry of Health is doing, Federal Ministry of Finance, Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, including NAFDAC, you see that we have no choice but to take that ratio to 90% of medicines consumed in Nigeria being manufactured locally and 10% to be imported.
You know, when I was going online, I did see one conversation about, you know, using our forefathers used to use herbs and things like that. Have we had that tested, or possibility of putting that in our pharmaceuticals, or is still sometime in the future?
Yeah, the future you see is very near when it comes to incorporation of herbal medicines into our medical practice generally in Nigeria. A lot of work is going. If you look at what NAFDAC has done in the recent years, they brought a lot of herbal medical practitioners under the purview of NAFDAC. They are being regulated, their products are being tested, they are being tested for toxicology to ensure that they are safe. The next thing they want to do is to go into the efficacy, to test the efficacy of what they are claiming. Therefore, we are in the right direction of incorporating that into what we do currently in Nigeria. And a lot of us pharma companies are also working with research institutes, whether you call it NIPRID, Medical Research Institute in Oshodi, NIPRID in Abuja, and other research centers in our various universities. A lot of work is going on to ensure that our local herbs, the active ingredients there, we are making sure that we now begin to incorporate them as is being done in China, India, and other jurisdictions, to ensure that we embrace the values and the benefits that our forefathers were using to treat our people in those days. And they are very effective. All we need to do is to do more. We need funding. We need more to do this. And I can assure you that local manufacturers, especially manufacturing facilities in Nigeria, we are working with our researchers, with NAFDAC, government agencies, to ensure that that is incorporated into what we do currently, not just to embrace only orthodox medicines alone. There are a lot of benefits, a lot of values entrenched in herbal medicines. And I can assure you that we are working towards that in no distant future. You see all these being displayed. As a matter of fact, when you come to some factories, you see herbal medicines being produced, being manufactured as though they were orthodox, given the kind of technologies that have gone into it, the kind of research work that we have done into that, and so many other things that we are doing to ensure that herbal medicines.
You know, making it available is one, the market is another, because over the years, the taste of the consumers, mostly in Nigeria, seem to have turned to the orthodox. So would you have to do work on that side, or do you already have a ready market for that aspect of the product?
Thank you very much. I understand what you mean by the taste of the consumers, of their preference. Remember, in those days in Nigeria, we all had preferences for foreign-made goods, including food, rice, beverages, and what have you. But today, why did I say that as of today, 70% of products that we are consuming, especially medicines that we are consuming in Nigeria, are manufactured locally? Tastes and preferences are changing for so many reasons. One, for economic reasons. Two, enlightenment campaign on the part of government and practitioners, in that people have now come to realize that when it comes to efficacy of products, safety and quality, Imported products are not better than what we're manufacturing in Nigeria. People have come to realize that. Therefore, all those olden days perception that it can only be good if it is foreign is long gone. And a lot of people are now embracing locally manufactured products, even in surgery, everywhere, in high-tech products. We are all going into it, into diabetes, hypertensive drugs, and biologics. We are going into all this. I mean, large volume parenterals. You mentioned them. Nigeria is now producing them, and people are embracing them. Go to all the hospitals. You can hardly see any infusion products, which is commonly called drips, being imported into Nigeria again. And these are high-tech products. They are very expensive to manufacture. We have the capacity, we have the capability, we have the machinery, we have the quality management system to manufacture all this. That's the quality, I mean, the capacity. Capacity is about the capacity and the capability of your people. They are all there. You go to some factories today, you don't see any foreigners. We run all those machines ourselves. We do our quality management system ourselves. We do our formulation ourselves, our research by ourselves. That doesn't mean we don't need expertise from abroad. They are there. But what we do, especially in PMG-MAN, is to ensure that majority of the companies where you see foreigners, they are on contract. You train our people, you do transfer of skills, technology, and knowledge. And after 2, 3, 4 years, we ask them to go. Therefore, when you come to a company like Fitson today, you could hardly see any foreigners except those who are on contract, and their duty, their primary responsibility is to train Nigerians, transfer skills and technology, and you go back to your country. That is where we are today. Therefore, we are getting there. It's a matter of time.
But you still mentioned the issue of capital, though.
Yeah, capital is quite essential. And I want to give kudos to, again, the federal government of Nigeria and the policy. It's developmental banks like BOI, even CBN and Nexim. They are really trying in ensuring that we get loans or facilities that are softer in nature than what commercial banks will give you, and they are also longer tenured. Today, the commercial banks will not give you anything less than maybe 24 to 26%, whereas BOI can still give you about 13 to 15% longer tenured, and that enables us to fund capital expenditure like importation of machineries, raw materials, working capitals, and also to expand our operations. Today, given the policies of NAFDAC, especially their 5+5 policy, import ceiling policy, and other policies being pursued by NAFDAC, a lot of us are now doing more in terms of capacity expansion of the current facility, producing more, and even greenfield projects are going on in so many companies like Fitson, Emzor, SKG, Miriam Baker, and what have you. All of them are now building new facilities because of increased demands for local manufactured medicines in Nigeria, and we are employing more people. And by the time we put all this together, it's a matter of time before you begin to now see prices of these commodities coming down in Nigeria. Therefore, funding is there, but if government can ensure that we have access to cheaper funding, we are not asking for grants. It's not there. But if you can get single-digit facility, we have access to good facility, long tenured, I can assure you that Nigeria is going to become what India is to Asia in terms of medicine manufacturing. Nigeria will become one, not only to West Africa, but to Africa. Because whether you like it or not, manufacturing capacity for medicines in Nigeria is about 60 to 70% of what obtains in the entire West Africa. I doubt if any country in Africa has the kind of capacity to manufacture in Nigeria, including South Africa and Egypt. They do not have. PMG-MAN can boast of about 150 active manufacturers
in the pharmaceutical
sector alone in Nigeria. 150 manufacturers who are very active in manufacturing, and they all have standard manufacturing practices. The quality management system there is unparalleled. You can't compare it to what obtains in other countries. Therefore, NAFDAC is also there. It is because of that NAFDAC was able to be given ML3 status. They are going to ML4 now, and before you know it, NAFDAC will be WLA, that is WHO listed authority, which means any medicines manufactured in Nigeria can be sold anywhere in the world. These are opportunities.
So quality control is perfect.
Ask NAFDAC. And I'm sure when you visit your clinics, your hospitals, they give you Nigerian-made products. And you get instant relief from those medicines. Then what are we talking about concerning quality management systems? A lot of companies in Nigeria are already WHO pre-qualified. Some companies are already going through WHO pre-qualification of their products today. What else do you want? The same thing FDA in America is doing. The same thing WHO is doing in Western world is what we are doing in Nigeria. We have the same body, the same regulatory authority. No singular authority in terms of regulatory is better than what NAFDAC is doing. NAFDAC has all the capacity, they have all the equipment, they have the personnel. Come to a factory and see what NAFDAC is doing. You will know that they are even more stringent on we local manufacturers than they do on imported products as of today in Nigeria. Therefore, kudos to NAFDAC.
But you know, I had a similar conversation some time ago, and there's this impression that it's only the big guys, I mean, Fitzin, you guys are the big ones, that are enjoying some of this, you know, that can give this kudos to the government. Those who are not so big are not feeling the benefits.
This is not true. This is not true. For example, the presidential executive order removing custom duties and other statutory taxes and levies from raw and packaging materials for as long as you are a certified PMG man member and you manufacture medicines approved and registered by NAFDAC. Honestly, you can access that. When you are importing machineries, IDEC is there. That is import duty exemption certificate issued by Federal Ministry of Finance, exempting certain products and commodities, especially machines, from taxes, duties, and what have you. Therefore, all you need to do, especially to access IDEC, is to register with the Federal Ministry of Health on IDEC platform and enter your project profile, submit all the necessary documents. All your machines will come into Nigeria free of duties and taxes and what have you. And the same thing obtains for raw and packaging materials, just like I have said.
As long as you
are registered and you are doing genuine businesses. Therefore, and as far as I know, for manufacturers of medicines in Nigeria, you enjoy the presidential executive order incentives and also the incentive offered by IDEC and other policies that government has put in place with their commensurate or accompanying incentives.
So no bureaucracy is going to exempt any qualified manufacturer?
There is no bureaucracy that can disqualify you for as long as you are a genuine manufacturers of medicines in Nigeria. You run your business correctly and you have the necessary documents. You have to pay your taxes. And like I said, on NIDEC platform, there are documents to be submitted. You do that. It's the same thing you want to collect facilities from any financial institutions. There are conditions, that you need to fulfill. Once you are able to do that, and to the best of my knowledge, I'm not only the MD of Fitting Healthcare PSC, I'm also the treasurer of PMG Man. Therefore, I know what obtains in PMG Man. For as long as you are a member of PMG Man, we have never had any complaints from anybody telling us that they could not access the benefits of either the PEO or IDEC, except they don't know how to go about it. And if they don't know how to go about it, let them come to the secretariat, we'll take them by the hand through.
Well, it's right to hear a private sector, giving applause to the federal government. And we really appreciate that, because that would mean progress for the economy, and health is wealth, is our first wealth. Anyways, thank you so much for your time on the program. Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Fitting Healthcare PLC, Mr. Biola Adebayo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you allow me to make my last wish.
Okay, please go ahead.
I want to give kudos to the current leadership in NAFDAC. The current leadership in NAFDAC is totally pro-manufacturing. The tenure of the current DG is coming to an end in another 16 or 17 months. I pray that the next government will give us another DG that will be pro-manufacturing. Thank you very much.
Well, it's a stakeholders conversation, so I guess that you would have to talk to your NAFDAC and your people to look for somebody who will be pro-manufacturing.
Exactly. Just like Professor Adeyeye.
All right, thank you so much, for your time on the program. Let's take a break now. When we come back, we'll go global. Please stay with us. Time to go global. Now we start from the United States, where the U.S. has levied 25% tariff on most imports from Brazil, and that is effective next week, concluding a year-long investigation into what Washington calls unfair trade practices and reigniting tensions with the Latin American nation after negotiation fell apart. The action taken under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974 targets Brazilian practices such as orders directing American technology firms, that includes X, Meta, and Google, to remove certain political content and suspend accounts belonging to U.S. residents, preferential tariffs for Mexico and India, weak intellectual property enforcement, and ethanol market barriers. The 25% levy set to take effect July 22 will apply to most imports from Brazil, with exemption for certain goods such as beef, orange juice, aircraft and parts, and as well as energy products. From the U.S., we go to South Korea. The central bank there has hiked benchmark policy rates, raising them for the very first time since January 2023, as inflation in the country, as with others, creeps up. The Bank of Korea's 25 basis points hike that increased rates to 2.75%. It was in line with estimates by economists. The move comes as inflation is expected to remain above BOK's target of 2% for a considerable time. The central bank says in its statement that inflation is projected to remain elevated for some time as the impact of the rise in energy prices feeds through with a time lag. Headline inflation in South Korea in June, that went up to its highest since 2023 at 3.2%. The central bank flagged uncertainty in exchange rate, pace of domestic demand recovery, and increase in wages, while projecting headline inflation for 2026 at 2.7% and core inflation at somewhat higher than it previously forecast at 2.4%. In India, the country has raised export levies on diesel and aviation turbine fuel, that's jet fuel, and this follows a sharp rise in global oil prices driven by tightening fuel supplies and renewed geopolitical tensions. The revised duties take effect immediately after the government's latest review of fuel export taxes. Under the new rates, the export duty on diesel increases from 8.5 rupees to 15.5 rupees per litre, while the levy on jet fuel, that goes up from 7.5 rupees to 14.5 rupees per litre. At the same time, export duty on petrol, that has been reduced from 4 rupees to 2.5 rupees for a litre. The government says that the move is aimed at safeguarding domestic fuel supplies and responding to changing global market conditions. Analysts say the higher levies could reduce fuel exports, support local availability, and further tighten supplies in international markets, which is already facing increased pressures. And the European Union and India, they are moving to deepen their partnership beyond a proposed landmark free trade area, expanding cooperation in trade, technology, security, clean energy, and critical supply chains. Officials from both sides say negotiations on a long-awaited trade deal are making progress, while discussions are increasingly focused on broader strategic collaboration. The EU and India aim to strengthen investment, boost economic resilience, and reduce dependence on vulnerable global supply chains. The two partners are also pledging to enhance cooperation in digital innovation, defense, climate action, and connectivity as they seek to reinforce their strategic relationship amid growing geopolitical and economic uncertainties. And we end in Australia. Consumer inflation there is expected to fall 4.7% in July, dropping significantly from what it was in June, 5.5%. And this decline marks a 6-month low, according to latest survey released by Melbourne Institute. And this is despite drop in consumer expectations. Official underlying figures monitored by the Reserve Bank of Australia remain elevated. And data, according to data from the Australia Bureau of Statistics, the trimmed mean was recorded at 3.6%, which sits above the RBA's target band of 2 to 3%. That's it on Global News and Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey, a 55-minute journey. At 1:30, Laddie Williams will be back to give you updates from the world of business, especially the market. As at 1:30, I'm John McQuarrie, and I wish you the best of the rest of the day.